My name is Ashlyn Warda with the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal, and today I'm joined by Claire Dixon, the Executive Director of Talent Market. Claire, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the work that Talent Market does for the Liberty Movement?
You bet. So Talent Market is a nonprofit that serves free market nonprofits. We help place talent from entry level all the way up to executive level in pretty much every position you can imagine in the Liberty Movement, whether that's project management, legal, fundraising, communications, IT, HR. If you name it, we do it. We've been around for 15 years, and we've placed more than 1,300 individuals in the Liberty Movement, and we've worked with more than 265 liberty-oriented nonprofits. So that's what we do, and we're so excited to get connected to your network because we'd love to help the students and the recent grads who might be interested in a career in Liberty.
Awesome. So as a Liberty matchmaker, what are some tips that you would give students in college to prepare for the job market?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I will start by saying I was so clueless when I was in college, and so a lot of the thoughts and advice that I share are it's aimed toward helping people avoid some of the mistakes that I did. So one thing that stands out to me about what you can do today, as an undergrad or even a grad student, is get involved in the Liberty Movement if you think you want to build a career in the free market nonprofit sector. What does that mean? It means things like do an internship if you can do an internship. And that could be a summer internship, could be fall, could be spring. It doesn't have to be an internship. It can always just be getting involved with a like-minded organization. It might be an organization on campus, or there might be a national organization that you can get involved with, attend conferences, events, that kind of thing. Basically, just start dipping your toe in the water. And you're going to do a couple things if you do that. One, you're going to get great exposure to the Liberty Movement, but two, you're going to start building out your resume. And we can talk more about that in a bit, but if your resume really demonstrates your interest in Liberty, that's going to mean so much to hiring managers when you start applying for jobs. It's going to make you stand out if you're applying for a job and maybe you've got the same skills and the same major as someone else, but they haven't done anything related to advancing Liberty and you have, you're probably going to look like a much stronger candidate.
For anyone listening that may not be familiar with the phrase Liberty Movement, would you want
Yeah.
to just give us some context for that?
You bet. You bet. Sorry, that's my little jargon.
No, that's
So
okay.
when I say Liberty Movement, I'm referring to organizations that consider themselves to be either conservative or classical liberal organizations that are advancing limited government, free enterprise, personal responsibility, limited regulation, low taxes, free speech, you name it, in that category, and that's what we do. And as I mentioned before, we've worked with 265 plus nonprofits, so there's a wide range of issues they tackle. So it's hard to sort of summarize them briefly, but any organization that is advancing free market principles is what I would consider to be in the Liberty Movement.
Awesome. So as far as your work, how have you seen technology change the job market and hiring processes since you began?
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is one of those that we can talk about for the next hour, but I won't do that to you. It's changed it in a lot of ways. As I mentioned, we've been around 15 years. So many things have changed. I'll start with kind of the obvious, and that is technology has really allowed, I think, virtual work to be a thing. So when we launched 15 years ago, I have been working virtually the whole time, by the way. But I remember feeling like I was kind of alone out in the wilderness working virtually. And I would have to explain to my friends and neighbors, I really do have a job, just because you see me and I'm dressed like a slacker all day and I appear to be, working from home. I really am working. I really am. Anyway. But now I feel like I'm in the majority. And so at one point before, and COVID also had a major impact on this, but technology allowed it to happen. Without technology, I don't think this would have been a thing. We would have seen like a bounce back right to the office after COVID if technology hadn't allowed us to do otherwise. But pre-COVID, about 40% of our opportunities were virtual. And then it flip-flopped to 60%. And those numbers have held pretty steady. So, and this is a bit of a tangent, but we now see that organizations who are not willing to hire virtually, they're always going to be at a disadvantage because they're competing with organizations that will hire virtually. So anyway, it's a whole thing. So I think the first thing that screams to mind when you talk about technology and its impact on our world is, the sort of, not the advent, but the explosion of virtual work. I will also say it's very much so impacted the way the hiring process looks. And I could give you a bazillion examples, but I'll say one thing it's done is it's sort of lowered the barriers to entry in terms of applying for jobs, not necessarily in our world, but across the board. Here's what I mean. You can get on LinkedIn, for instance, and you can apply for a job with one click, right? And now that's not something we allow or most of our clients would ever allow, because that's an opportunity to see a pile of crappy applications. If we're being honest, people who aren't aligned, you have no way to know if they're aligned. You don't know if they care about your mission, and we're not hiring for baristas at Starbucks, right? We're hiring for people who care about liberty. So it's really important for us to not do things like one-click applications, but broadly speaking, technology has allowed those things to happen. And so not necessarily for our world, but for people outside of our space, it's made applying for jobs a lot easier. On the other side of that, it's made hiring managers' jobs very difficult because the volume of candidates they're seeing is so high. Another way it's impacted the hiring process is AI and cover letters that you can literally, go to what I won't even try to sell an AI source, but you go to X AI source and you say, type me a cover letter for this organization, and they're going to spit it out in 30 seconds. So that's been a source of interest and a lot of laughs here, because sometimes you can tell if a cover letter is AI generated, sometimes you can't. It's getting really, really good. And then if you go to an AI detector, those aren't even accurate necessarily because technology is changing so rapidly. So all this to say, and I'll come back to our earlier point about internships and fellowships and things like that. Anyone can use AI to write a good cover letter, but AI can't create the internship that you did last summer at AEI, right? So I think we're going to see those things matter so much more than maybe an AI generated cover letter. People are going to say, well, that cover letter looks good. However, what did you do? What can you do that, or tell me, that demonstrates your interest in liberty? I think that's where you're going to separate the wheat from the chaff. And then I will also say that in a way, it's raised the bar with cover letters. So again, anyone can use AI to write a cover letter, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine, but it's not going to be personal. And so when someone submits a cover letter that's personal, that talks about their story and why they came to love liberty, and then they connect that to the mission of the organization, those are the things that really get the attention of hiring managers. So in a way, it's created an opportunity for candidates to stand out by just being original and by not using technology as a crutch, frankly. So I have about 100 other things I could say about technology, but let's move on to the next question. If you want to come back to it, we can.
All right. So as far as college students are concerned, people who maybe don't have much job experience, what are some mistakes that they can avoid when first entering the job market?
Yeah. Wow. The first one is probably do your research. So when you submit an application to an organization, make sure you've researched the organization. I'm not saying you need to have done days and days of research, but know the organization well enough to know that you are aligned philosophically with their work. And then if you make it to the interview stage, absolutely do a ton of homework, because the organization is going to pelt you with questions. And if they think you're not prepared and you don't really know what they do, you're probably not going to make it past that initial interview. So I think doing the research is really, really important. And again, I understand on that first application, you don't necessarily want to invest hours and hours and hours, because you may not even hear back from the organization. So you have to be smart about it. You have to be measured. But again, do enough research to know that you are applying for something you are truly aligned with and you care about. The second thing I would say is be humble. I have interviewed a lot of young professionals who come in with a swagger.
Mhm.
I used to run a program up in DC, and I interviewed people all the time. And I remembered being sort of shocked when someone would come in with a swagger who had, 6 months or 6 days of work experience. And I thought, first of all, no one likes arrogance, right? Everyone loves humility. So come in with humility, but also like if you've been on the job market or if you've been in the real world for 5 minutes, you probably don't need to have a swagger yet. You can develop that swagger like in 30 years when you've done really cool things, but or maybe just even in 5 years when you've done really cool things, but probably not, 5 minutes into your career. So I think doing your research and being humble are two things you can do that again will set you apart from others.
So you mentioned a little bit about how cover letters have had a step up in their game.
Mhm.
So what are hiring managers looking for on resumes these days?
Yeah.
I remember like formatting was always a big deal, but is that still relevant?
Yes. Yeah. So let's break it down into content and formatting. And we're just talking about the resume at this point. Um, I would say content is king, right? People are truly looking for what have you done? And again, if you're a young professional, they want to know what you did in college. How do I know you're interested in this world? All sorts of other things. They care about where you went to school, what you studied, did you almost flunk out, or did you get good grades? Those kind of things. They all matter. So content is king. However, if you have a confusing resume and if the format is strange and if a hiring manager can't understand what you did and when, they may stop reading. That is always a danger. They stop reading and then they hit delete. Or if in our case, when talent market is the middleman and we're working with an organization on hiring, they'll just say decline that person. And there's nothing I can do to go back to the client and say, but it was just a confusing resume. I promise the candidate's good. They don't care. They've already moved on to somebody else. So I would make sure that the formatting is very clean and easy to read, logical, chronological. you know, uh, one thing that people do, and it isn't really new, but they have what's called an accomplishments resume, where they sort of start with a bunch of bullets, and then at the very bottom they tell you what their jobs were. This drives hiring managers crazy because they don't know when you did these things, where you did they don't have any context. So stick with the old-fashioned resume. That's my humble advice. Now, if you were applying for a job in the like ad agency world, I wouldn't say that. I would say something different. But in our world, just stick with the standard. I'm also a fan of black and white. You don't have to have crazy colors. If you're going to use a color, that's cool. Use like one color. Don't use 25 different colors. There's no need for photographs on resumes. Um, it doesn't always bother me, but I cannot tell you how many hiring managers have said, "Why did the person put a photo on the resume?" So it's not well received. Again, maybe in other industries it is, but it's really not in ours. So I would never suggest it. I'm not saying it's a deal killer or anything, but I don't hear positive responses to those kind of things, so I would probably avoid it. So again, a clean, easy to read resume, I think, is probably the most important thing you can do. But as I said before, the actual content of your resume is truly the most important thing.
So you mentioned that new hires should come in with an air of humility. What else do you wish new graduates knew about entering the workforce?
Oh my gosh. Well, the first thing I wish they knew is that the free market nonprofit movement, the liberty movement, exists. I didn't know it existed in undergrad. And then even coming out of graduate school, I went to graduate school so that I could come in this world. But when I got out of graduate school and I really started applying for jobs, I couldn't believe how many opportunities there were. And that was a long time ago. There are so many more organizations and so many more opportunities now. And so, I wish I could connect with every liberty-oriented college student, graduate student, and just tell them, if you are really excited about liberty, you can build a career here. And there's this misconception that, oh, it's the nonprofit world. I'll have to eat oatmeal every day. I'll be poor. Okay, this is not true. You can you can do quite well. But there are just so many opportunities. not even just in DC. It used to be that, DC is where it is, or where it was. And if you wanted to work in this world, you had to be in DC. That is so old thinking, right? Because you live in the Raleigh area, right? I live in South Carolina. And like we said before, you can work virtually. So people can contribute to this world and build meaningful careers in this world, living anywhere they want. So the first thing I wish they knew is that we existed. um, Gosh, the second thing, I'll just leave it at that for now. There are a few things I'm thinking of, but I think, we've talked about the research, we've talked about the humility. I think when you ask that question, it just screamed to my mind that people don't even know what they can do in this world. So I'll just leave it at that. And if we want to dig in on it later, we can do that.
All right. Do you have any things that you would recommend avoiding when you're interviewing for your first job?
Ooh, the first one that comes to mind is make sure you have questions. Might sound a little silly, but you're going to get to the end of the interview and the hiring manager is going to say, "What questions do you have for me?" And if you say, I don't have any, they're going to think you're not curious. They're going to think you're not prepared. They're going to think you don't really care because you can't think of a single thing to ask. And I always compare dating and interviewing because they are so similar. And so think about it like you're on a date. If you were on a date and the person didn't have anything to ask you, you'd be like, well, I don't know if they're really interested in me. So you don't want to send that signal. You definitely want to have questions. So we've already talked about the research too. You want to make sure you've done the research. And then again, the alignment. And this is something that is different, I think, for our world than other places. So I want to dig in a little bit. You want to make sure you've done your research so that you know you're aligned with organizations. But you also want to make sure, and this is true of your cover letter, but also in the interview, that you are articulating that interest. If you're applying for a job in the private sector, you don't want to talk about how much you love liberty, right? In fact, in a lot of places, it would work against you. Crazy, but very, very true. We've all seen it. So in our world, though, it's the opposite. You need to make sure that your application says very loudly and proudly, I'm aligned with your organization, and here's why I care about the principles of liberty. And that's going to carry through to your interview as well, because you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to want to talk about your alignment. They're going to want to talk about your philosophical influences. They're going to want to talk about why you care about these issues. Why do you care about this job? Why do you care about this organization? What things that we've done are of most interest to you? If it's a legal firm, what cases are of the most interest to you? If it's an organization that does various public policy issues, which public policy issue really fires you up that we work on? And just make sure you're prepared to answer all of those things and really, again, demonstrate your alignment and passion for the organization.
Do you have anything else you would add for interviewing well? I think we hit a lot of good things.
Well, this might be something you want to talk about in a broader context, but I'll throw it out there because it's so relevant for interviewing, and that is dress appropriately. So we're in an interesting time where people are more casual, again, especially working virtually and in this post-COVID world. But I wouldn't push your luck in an interview. I would definitely come in, maybe dressed either on par with what you think that organization dresses like on a daily basis, or just a touch up. I've never heard of a situation where someone held it against a candidate because they dressed too nicely. Oh, they came in a suit, but we're business casual, so we're not going to hire them. No one says this. What they say is, we're all in business attire and they came in, looking like a slacker. So make sure you kind of dress up. And as I'm fond of saying, if you dress like an intern when you're an intern, you might be an intern for a long time. Maybe dress like your boss, right? Dress for the role that you want to have next, not necessarily the role you have now. And I will say that I was the worst offender here. I know I was when I was young, and I remember being broke and I couldn't afford, nice clothes. So one tip might be, if you're feeling like I was feeling, which is young and broke, maybe save up some money and buy some nice business attire, or say to your parents, hey, for my next birthday, maybe you can buy me a nice suit, or whatever. It doesn't have to be necessarily a suit, but some nice business dresses, whatever, attire that you can wear in an interview and that you can wear on the job that, again, will kind of take you up a notch. It is amazing how much more seriously people will take you if you're dressed really professionally. And so dress up, not down, and also think about, appropriate attire. So I'll pick on women and men here. Women don't wear super short skirts or, 5.5-inch heels, and don't look like you're going to a club, and, don't wear revealing things. And for dudes, it's the same thing. We don't need to see really tight pants or, shirts that show your muscles. Like, just be appropriate. Be appropriate. We're in a work setting. It's not a hot date. This is one time where dating and interviewing are different. You do not want to wear the same things. So just dress for the job that you want to have.
All right. So what advice would you give to someone who feels like they didn't do well in their interview?
Oh, I've had those I've had those bombs, I guess. The first thing I'll say is, I hear this all the time from candidates. I'll say, how did your interview go? And they'll say, well, I bombed it. And it is amazing how often they were wrong, and they actually didn't bomb it. Okay. So the first thing is, you probably didn't bomb it. You're probably being hard on yourself. So don't worry about it. 2, if you did, it's okay. It happens. It's going to be a learning experience. And there's nothing you can do about it now. What you can do, though, is prepare for the next one and dissect what you think you did wrong, and maybe try to be better next time. And you probably will know why you bombed it. In fact, candidates always tell me that. Well, they asked me this and I wasn't prepared. Or, and this is a common one too, like, we were clearly on different pages when it comes to blank, right? Like, so they wanted to go in this direction, I wanted to go in that direction, or, strategy or whatever. So it might just be that it's not a good match. Like dating, it's not always going to be a good match, and that's okay. And it's good that you figured it out now versus 6 months into your job. So, so it's okay. But the other thing I'll say is, if you go in with humility, that is a theme here this morning, right? You're probably not going to bomb it. And what do I mean by that? I mean, as we said before, no one likes arrogance. But if you come in with humility, that means you've done your research, right? If you came in thinking, I don't know if I'm going to get this job, but I really want this job, then my guess is you prepared really well. And if you come in with humility, that is very attractive to the hiring manager. As we said before, no one likes somebody who comes in with a big swagger, right? So come in with humility, and you're probably going to exceed your own expectations. And I'll share a little story. As I mentioned before, I used to do a lot of interviewing, and I interviewed so many people who were so nervous, like clearly nervous, like sweaty palms and like almost shaking. And I never, ever, ever, ever held that against them. I was always like, this person really wants the job. And they're humble enough to know they're competing with a lot of other people. And so they're coming in thinking, I really hope I do well because I really want this job, and I know I'm not a shoo-in. That is so attractive to someone who's in a hiring manager position, right? They don't want the person who comes in and says, I'm the best candidate you have. And again, as I look at the candidate pool, when someone tells me that, I'm like, how do you know you're the best candidate? Because I'm looking at 100 other applications, and I got to tell you, you don't necessarily look like the best one. But I don't actually say that part. That's the quiet part. Anyway, so if you come in with humility, my guess is you're not going to bomb it. But if you do and you don't get the job, it's okay. Because that happens. And again, you're probably going to learn more from the failure than you will from the success. So it's okay.
Right. I feel like interviewing, it just takes practice. And I kind of feel like you don't think about that until you're in your first interview.
Yes. Yes, it's true. And then, oops, maybe I should have prepared more. But again, I bet you have always done better than you thought you did, right? So
So how can someone get connected to Talent Market?
you bet. So talentmarket.org is our website. If you go to our website, you will see in big orange letters, submit your resume. If you submit your resume via that form, first of all, it'll take you maybe 2 minutes, and it's actually a fun form. And I promise you will laugh at least once when completing the form. I get so much feedback from people saying that was actually really fun to do. So send us your stuff. Now, here's what's going to happen if you do that. We're going to get your resume. We're going to get all the fun details you share with us. We're not going to share it with anybody, but once we have that, we will know what to tell you about. So we will know which jobs interest you, where you want to work, what you want to make, the kinds of organizations you're interested in, blah, blah, blah. So once we have that information, we're able to communicate with you about roles that are of interest to you. And then you can apply for anything your heart desires. You'll also end up on our newsletter list if you do that, which comes out once a month. It gives you great interviewing and dating tips, and it also tells you all of our current openings. And then it also tells you about the people we just placed, which I think is interesting because you'll probably see some of your friends. The longer you stay in this world, you'll see some of your friends show up on that placement list. So send us your information. You can also reach out to me personally, claire@talentmarket.org. Email me anytime. Would love to get connected.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention?
Gosh, yeah, I will say that the last time I ran the numbers, I think it was 66% of the roles we work on are either entry or mid-level. So, and there's a fine line between those two because a lot of hiring managers say, we want to hire someone who's entry or mid-level. They're open to both. So, if you are just coming out of college and you think, oh gosh, I don't know, can Talent Market help me? Yes, Talent Market can absolutely help you because this is our bread and butter. Now we absolutely do senior level and executive level searches. We do those all the time as well, but it's a numbers game, right? If you look at an organization, you've only got one executive, you've got some executive team members, and then you've got a lot of staff. So just based on the numbers, most of the roles we work on are going to be entry and mid-level. So we would love to get connected with y'all and help you not only today, but in 20 years from now. And at this point, 15 years in, I can tell you there are people that we have helped place now like 3 different times in their careers. So we would love for y'all to be one of those people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us today. And we're excited to share this information with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to getting connected to all of your students and recent graduates.